That's good. It is now 6:05 PM. It's now time for the August 15th, 2024 Board of Directors Special Meeting at Town Hall. Georgetown Divide Public Utility District is now called to order. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Saunders,
Present.
Director Stovall,
Present.
Treasurer Thornborough,
Here.
Vice President Seaman, here, and President McDonald.
Present. Staff.
Sure. So presenting.
I'm sorry. One second.
When I was on the phone. I thought it was going next.
Okay, so in terms of presenting staff today, we have General Manager Nicholas Schneider. We have in the back, Operations Manager Adam Brown, Water Resource Manager Alexis Elliott, Office Finance Manager Jessica Buckle, Legal Counsel. Today we have Joanna Jin, and then presenting with Water Resource Economics, we have Sanjay Gar.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. We also have Lutfi online for legal counsel as well.
Thank you very much. Okay. Director Saunders, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
First time I had to be quiet in the library.
Now we're going to ask if there's any public comments for the adoption of the agenda. Open it up to you now. For those online also. I don't see any hands raised or anybody here who wants to make a comment, so I'll now close the public comment period. There'll be no further public comments allowed. At this time, I'd like to ask if any director would like to make a motion to pass the agenda.
Motion to adopt the agenda. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously 5-0 to adopt the agenda. At this time, we're going to open it up for a 3-minute public comment period.
No, public forum will be, the public forum is part of the process of them allowing to comment on the presentation. So there's no public forum because you can only comment on items on the agenda anyway.
Okay. All right. So then with that, we will now open up this special meeting workshop item. And Sanjay. Thank you. Yeah.
President, board members, staff, and public, it's my pleasure to be here. My name is Sanjay Gar. I'm with Water Resource Economics. I'll be facilitating today's discussion on the water rate studies. Just a little background about myself. This is what I do for a living. I've done this for 25 years. I've assisted over 150 different agencies in California on how we do rate studies. My most recent ones was El Dorado Irrigation District, maybe that way, and then Placer County, which most likely is that way. I've also am part of a trade association called the American Water Works Association National. There's a committee called the M1 that sets the standards associated with rate studies. I'm a part of that committee, and I write books and manuals on how you do this. So as you can see, I'm a very exciting person because this is what I do for a living, and many people want to talk to me at cocktail parties just to know more about how this gets done. So today, okay, thank you so much. So we're gonna go to the next slide. So what the plan is for me to do this presentation. After the presentation, we want to hear your comments and thoughts. So definitely write down any of your questions or comments, but we want to go through it all. Because you may have a question and then I may answer it later on. Let me go through my presentation, write down your comments, and then we will have a discussion or you'll ask questions and we'll try our best to answer your questions and concerns. So today's agenda is the following. We're going to be going over the rate study. Liz, maybe can we move on their screen, they can see the dialogue box? Is it possible to move that off? So we have the full screen, or is that not? Yeah, there you go. Perfect. All right, thank you. So we're gonna go over the rate study process, how we do a rate study. There is a process, a standard of care about doing these. Then we're gonna get into two sections. The first one is treated and raw water. Raw water is ditch water, irrigation water, it's the canal water. That's what we're talking about. And then treated water is what you drink inside your house or use inside your house. We'll go over the financial plan. We'll go over how we allocate costs. We'll talk about the rates. We'll talk about both on the treated and raw water. We'll show you impacts. What does this mean to you as a customer? There's a lot of information here we want to present. We want to be as transparent as possible. One of the things about setting rates is that rates can be arbitrary and capricious. And this is a fee for service. So this is not a tax. A lot of times people confuse this as a tax. A tax is a distribution of wealth, and it's also used for to fund general benefits. This is a specific benefit to your property. Because as we all know, if we don't have water on our property, the value of our property turns to zero very quickly. So this is a property related service, and so it has to be a fee. And because it's a fee, it has to have logic and rationality, and that's why the district hired me to do the study. Then we're going to talk about zone wastewater rates. Zone is all the individuals who live at Alt. So if you live in Alt, that'll be something that you'll be wanting to hear about. If you don't live there, then you may not be as concerned about that. We'll go to the next slide, Liz. So there's a lot of jargon in any industry. If you've worked in any technical field, there's always jargon terminologies. We love jargon terminologies, makes us feel good. And so we have our own, and this is a list of them. And so we have fiscal year. So calendar year, we all know about New Year's Eve. We all love that day, and New Year's Day, the day after can be sometimes challenging. In the government's world, you have fiscal years, and typically, not all government, but most government go from July 1st to June 30th. So that's the year that we work in. So I have fiscal years, you'll see that FY, that's what I'm talking about. We have operation and maintenance, or O&M, that's another jargon term we use. Operation and maintenance, think of that as, I like my metaphor of my car a lot, so I'll be talking about a car. That's the gasoline. So that's what we're talking about, gasoline. So if you're a household, it could be the food that you need to buy, the electricity, the water bill, that's all that stuff. Capital, when we also have CIP is another expression, or capital improvement plan, that's the infrastructure. So again, back to the metaphor of the car, that's the brakes, that's the tires being changed. In the house, that's fixing the roof, remodeling the bathroom. So, and then we also have a couple of debt service. It's common when you deal with large infrastructure to issue debt, like when you buy a house, you issue debt. When you buy a car, you may issue debt to be able to have that car that you like. Same thing with the water system. A lot of times we issue debt if it makes sense. And there's two debts that they have right now. They have the sweet water treatment plant. That's a treatment plant. And they have a supplemental charge for that. And that's a specific line item that was called out on the bill. So when I say that, that's what we're talking about. We have COS, that's cost of service. Cost of service is how we allocate cost to customers, so proportionality. Remember I talked earlier about this tax and general benefit, specific benefit. So this is that specific benefit, this is the cost of service, this is allocating costs. Then we get into measurements of water. I didn't create these measurements, so don't blame me, but somebody came up with a great idea of cubic feet. And a cubic feet is 7.48 gallons. So this community charge in CF, other communities, El Dorado, Placer, charge in CCF, that's 100 cubic feet. So again, I didn't create the chaos, somebody else did. Then we also have minor inches. Minor inches are the ditch water customers. You may know that. You either have a half inch or an inch. That's that square that you can get the water. And then we also have something called acre feet. Acre feet is of water is another terminology we like to use. And that's basically, think of an acre, that's football out there, a foot of acre of water, that's acre feet. And that's usually used more in the wholesale world. And as you can see, it equals 43,560 CF. And then you can multiply that by 7.48 to get the gallons. Then we also have Alt Zone, that's Auburn Lake Trails, wastewater service area. Again, if you live in that area, you know that. If you don't, then you may not care too much about that. And then we also have the community disposal system for zone wastewater customers. So we went over all those terminologies, and then we go over the rate study process. So how do we do a rate study? So there's the first thing we want to know is where we want to go. What are the policies? What are the objectives of doing a rate study? So we look at the reserve policies. We ask ourselves what rate structure makes sense in our community. What are the goals and values of our community? So that's the first thing we do. Once we understand generally what makes sense in our community, those values, then we do the financial plan. Financial plan is about how much revenue we need to generate on an annual basis to fund these two enterprises. So they're like businesses. Now, unlike other businesses who have shareholders and profit, this is a nonprofit business. So no money is leaving this and going to someone else and in the sense of shares or profit or anything. It's just staying there. There are expenses, of course. So there's things that need to be paid. There's salary, there's staff, there's equipment that needs to be built. So those are expenditures that occur. But the financial plan is about how much revenue we need on an annual basis to make sure that these two critical assets, our services, water and wastewater service, are readily available. The second is cost of service. Cost of service is how we allocate those costs to each customer so that each customer pays its fair share and there's no subsidy or cross subsidy. Because as I mentioned earlier, this is a specific benefit to each of you. And we don't want someone to be subsidized. Financial plan, my metaphor here, if you heard it before, sorry, is Super Bowl Sunday. How many pizzas do I order? So that's the financial plan. Cost of service is what kind of pizza should I order? How many, do I have any friends that are vegan or vegetarian? All my friends are meat eaters? What are the different types of pizzas I need and how should I slice them? Double slice, single slice, squares. Come on in, join the fun.
You're out of these.
Huh?
They're out of these.
He's out of these? We have one right here. There we go. Here you go, young man. I don't know how much you could. Decide whether he wants to join us.
Sorry, I did, let's go.
Yeah, that's right. So the next step is rate design, and that's the question about what kind of rate structure makes sense in our community. How should we design that? And the last one is the documentation and the report. We've gone up to step 4 of this process. We haven't done step 5. That'll be the next part of the study. So we've had a series of meetings this week here, going over this information with you to receive your input, to hear you. And then once we've heard you and decide what makes sense, then we will proceed on with developing the report. That report is what we call an administrative record. It documents, it sort of clearly explains how we do the study. It shows all the math. The idea is that you can get your pen and paper and actually follow along if you like. I encourage you to do it. It's really fun to do. So Prop 218 requirement. So Prop 218 is through a series of court cases. The first Prop 218 is something that was voted by us in the 90s. And then through a series of court cases, water and wastewater is considered a property related service. And those court cases have changed over time and evolved. But the key thing here is that we need to make sure it's proportional. It's a logic and rational. But what I like to think of is that the rates can't be arbitrary and capricious. We have to have a story. We have to have sense. I work with Nicholas. I work with Adam. I work with all the staff here to make sure that whatever we come up with sticks here. This makes sense. This is how we operate our system, because it's about how we operate the water and wastewater system and then who should bear those costs. And these studies should be done every 5 years. That's the ideal world. So now we're going to take our journey in this discussion, and we're going to go and talk about treated and raw water customers. And I want to, before I dive into all the details, I want to make sure we understand the severity of what we're talking about. So the first thing is that the last rate increase occurred in 2019. So you've been paying the same rate since 2019. So we all know, at least for me, that felt like a long time ago, 2019. That was a lot's changed since then. And one of the things that we've all experienced is inflation. So inflation, has been over 19% since then. That inflationary cost that's hit you also hit the district in the sense of energy costs the district has, material costs, all those different things. In addition, one of the challenges with running a water and wastewater system is that it's very capital intensive. And most people don't think about it. Most people, we take water for granted, it comes from the sky. It's given to us. But there's actually a lot of infrastructure that's needed to make sure it's available to our house. So it needs to meet certain standards of care with the water quality. It needs to be pressurized. It needs to be reliable. It needs to be there 24/7, 7 days a week. All that infrastructure does that. So it's one of the most capital intensive products there is. And because of that, we're always repairing and maintaining the system. The other challenge is that this is an older community, as you know. And those assets are old. So back to my metaphor of the car, we have a 30-year-old, 40-year-old car now. In this case, it's even older with the water system. And so all that infrastructure now needs to be replaced. In the past, the government has provided us funding. Developers may have built things, but now we need to do it ourselves. So that's the challenge. Now, Nicholas has done a great job in raising grants and getting money there for that. And it's been, what he's been telling me is pretty amazing. So if you can get more of that, that will help offset these costs. But we can't really take that for granted, that the government will bail us out. And in addition, we've had reduction in demand. The reduction in demand has been through the droughts. If you may know, there was 2 significant droughts that we experienced in the last 10 years. And that has changed how much water we use. Now, you would think, well, if we use less water, costs should go down, so we should be saving money. But in reality, remember I mentioned earlier, all those pipes, all those things, they're still there. They still need to be fixed. So even though we may not drive the car as much, we still have to pay the car payment. And that's what's happening now, is that car that we bought, we don't drive it as much because gasoline is more expensive potentially, but we still have to pay the payment. So the same thing here is that we have these assets, we have these costs that we have to make sure is readily available, because in case something happens, and that's something that happens, is something you just experienced recently with the fires. We want to make sure we have water readily available to deal with those emergencies. And so that's the challenge here, is that we have this asset emergency just in case something goes wrong. So because of all these challenges, we will not meet our operating costs. We will not be able to buy the gas, as I mentioned, by 2025. The district also has debt issuance. When you issue debt, you need to meet sort of a covenant, a requirement. So we'll be in technical default. And what does that mean? That means that the credit rating of the agency will get degraded. I mean, you can say it's almost like saying, an individual filing for bankruptcy. I mean, it's not that extreme, but it's in that, I don't want to say it's like filing bankruptcy in that extreme, but it's like, over here, it's not good. It's not a good thing for an agency to do. And the credit rating will go down and the borrower could ask for the money back. And if everything stayed the same, the district would run out of money by 2029. Now, of course, if the district didn't adopt these rates, they wouldn't, run the ship down to the ground and go bankrupt by 2029, but they would cut costs and services. And what that means is that your ability to have safe, reliable drinking water will be diminished. And that'll be a challenge. And so we want to make sure that's there. So any of you who've been to another country where water's not reliable and safe, that's scary. So we want to ask ourselves in the next section is how much revenue does a district need to keep the water safe and reliable? And that's the question we want to ask ourselves. So in order to do that, first question we ask is reserves. So reserves, the district needs money in the bank, and I'm going to go over the reserve and then why we need that in a second. So there's an operating reserve, that's the cash flow. The district bills you bi-monthly, so you pay every bi-monthly, but the district has to pay its expense more periodically than bi-monthly, maybe every 2 weeks, every month. So there's a cash flow there. So we would normal industry standard 33% of operating. And this is money, this is the savings, guys. We're not asking for this every year. We put this set aside. The second one is capital replacement. In order to award a contract, you have to have the money to be able to do that. That's $600,000. And then emergency, $2 million. So emergency is a fire, earthquake, anything like that, a pipe breaking. So, the government FEMA could help us out in those severe situations, but FEMA won't cash flow the problem. They'll reimburse us. So the district still needs the money to pay for things and then hopefully get reimbursed. So what we're saying is that the district needs $4.3 million in the bank to deal with these reserves. Now, as a ratepayer, you may say to yourself, well, that's a lot of money. Like, why do they need that much money? Shouldn't that go back to me, the ratepayer? Because this system is technically owned by everyone in this community. The reason why we want that money is that if something goes wrong, this helps avoid rate shock. Because the district can then utilize this fund of revenue instead of automatically increasing your rates instantaneously. So this helps you in the sense in the long run in minimizing impacts. The district has this money already, so we're not saying to increase rates for the sake of a reserve. We already have that. So next I want to show is a series of graphs going into the financial plan. The district needs basically $3.9 million in capital improvement or CIP over the next 5 years. This is the expenditure level. This information is consistent with the document online that's called
we have a budget and a 5-year CIP, capital improvement plan.
So one of my due diligence that I need to do is as I do these studies is to work with staff to make sure all my information ties with other information that district provides. So it's a consistent story. So this is what the district plans, engineers do their technical analysis to determine what are the capital needs to maintain the system. And then what we do is put that into the financial plan. The next graph shows the financial situation from a cash flow perspective. The bars are expenditures, and we have the different types of expenditures, O&M, that's operating maintenance, metaphoric gasoline. We have debt service, that's your mortgage payment. We have rate funded CIP, that's the project we want to do around the house to maintain the system. And then we have the line, which is the current revenues. As you can see, in 2025, we're looking good. We're okay. We're meeting our expenditure line is above the bars. But in 2026, all of it goes through and it's going through the green section. And then 2027, it gets even worse. And then 2028, it's in the blue section and 29. So in all this years out from 26 onward, we're not meeting our expenses. And sometimes that's okay for a district to do that because you have reserves. So if we go to the next chart, we see the reserve situation. And what's happening though, is that in 2025, we're fine with our reserves, but then in 26 to 28, we're below our reserve target. To be below the reserve target 1 year, it's not great, but that's livable, that happens. But you don't want to be consistently below the reserve target. And then in 2029, we're negative fund balance. So in order for, if we don't do a rate increase, that means we have to diminish the service that we provide. And that's the challenge here. And so that's what do we want? And so the direction is or the thought is that we should increase the rate to make sure we have this readily available. Next slide then shows the coverage ratio. That's that debt issuance that I told you about. When you issue debt, you have a covenant, you have a requirement to meet. In 2026 onward, we're below that covenant. If you're interested in knowing how that's determined as that ratio, I can go into that. It's a math there, but this is industry standard in the sense of, and this is what your obligation is, not even just shed, it's your obligation. When you issue this debt, you told the issuer that you would do a certain thing, and we're not doing that. And because we're not doing that, then we're in technical default, we're breaching that contract, and they could ask for our money back. And we don't want that to occur. So in order to solve this problem, we go to the next slide. These are the revenue adjustments. This is an increase in revenue that we're suggesting, which is a 15% and followed by 10% each year. If we do that, then we meet all our expenses. Now, we have had series of discussions with the board about these increases. The first time I met with the board, and I should have remembered the date, but it was 2 or 3 months ago. Ish, and there's a website that has all this information, so you can, we definitely recommend you look at the website, it has all the dates and my presentation. At that presentation, I was proposing even a higher increase. We sharpened our pencil, we worked with staff, we asked ourselves, well, what can we cut? Those increases were so significant. So we've come from a relatively high place, 25%, I believe, was the first year. Now went down to 15, and then we have 10. So these are still high. I'm not gonna, say it's not. They are high, but this is the challenge that water and wastewater systems are facing throughout California and United States, in that these are the increases that we're seeing because of the aging infrastructure and also the inflationary increase that we just experienced. So by doing those, what happens next is that we're meeting our reserve targets. The dotted line is the reserve goal, the green bars are the ending balance. So that's good from that perspective. We go to the next chart, is the coverage ratio. We're meeting our coverage ratio, and that looks good. So by doing those increases, and so that's the first step of the study. Remember I said there's a couple of steps. The first is financial plan, and then I'm going to go into cost of service next. So the next question I want to ask is, how much does it cost to provide treated and raw water service? So we want to make sure each customer class pays its fair share and one doesn't subsidize the other. And again, because this is a fee for service, this is not a tax. And so in order to do that kind of analysis, we really peel back the onion and really get into the nitty-gritty of the system. So and there's a lot of numbers here. I'm not going to go through all these numbers. If you're interested, we can go over it. But my point of showing this is that I'm not being arbitrary and capricious. I'm not making stuff up. There is a logic and rationality to this story. And that story is we look at the operating revenues. We ask how much of that there is. We ask ourselves how much operating revenue offsets we have. And those are interest income, miscellaneous fees, late fees, almost more than $500,000. We ask what's our capital expenditure this year, $726,000. We ask about the debts. What are the two debts we have? What are their payments? We ask about the hydro revenues that we receive. So we take into account also other sources of revenue. Well, we receive $55,000. The district also receives property tax. It will get a percentage of the property tax. That's roughly $2 million. So we know how much revenue we need to collect from rates, which is $4 million. And we go through an exercise where we look at these components and we ask ourselves, well, how much of those costs should be from treated and raw water customers? And what's the logic and rationality? So in order to do that logic and rationality, we look at different factors. And there's basically 3 factors we look at. We look at usage. We look at how much water is being used by the treated and raw water customers. Raw water customers do use a lot more water than treated, which usually is the case. We also look at number of connections. And then we also understand that raw water customers, you only receive that water 5 months out of the year. Treated customers receive it 12 months out of the year. In addition, if things got a little bit dire, raw water customers would be cut off first, because we always want to make sure we have water available for health and safety indoor needs. So there's a higher reliability that we need for the treated water. And given that treated water has 7 months more than the raw water customer, we use that 7 month as the factor for the reliability. They have all 7, they have the whole year, they have 7 additional months. Raw water customers only have 5 months. We use this reliability factor also to take that into account. So based on those 3 different factors, and there's a lot, there's the numbers here with number of connections, annual water use, reliability usage down and below. Those are the numbers that we use. The above shows you the math, how we got there. And again, you can get your calculator out, start dividing if you're interested. But again, I want to be 100% transparent. We will have a report also that will show you the math and how we walk through this. So based on that information, then we go through the budget. And there's source of supply, raw water, water treatment, distribution, T and D is transmission distribution, admin customer service, hydro. And then we start asking ourselves, what makes sense to allocate these costs? So we use reliability usage, the treatment plants and transmission distribution should be all in treated customer, raw waters don't do SaaS. Some should be based on number of connection, admin and customer service. That's the cost of issuing a bill. And then if there is a hydro expense, that'd be water usage. So we start coming up with a logic and rationality and allocating it. Then we go to the capital expense. We do the same thing here. We look at all the different components of the capital and we go through the same logic and rationality. I'm not going to go through all of these, but if you're interested, I'd love to talk about them. And then once we have those information, now we can start putting this puzzle together where we look at, well, operating revenue, that was 2 slides ago, at 88%, 12% on the bottom. Operating revenue offsets, we're using the same percentages. Capital, that was in the prior slide, we looked at the total asset. Debt service, 100% treated customers. Hydro, water usage, property tax, number of connection. And then we get to this number, 90% and 10%. So what we're saying is that 90% of the expenditure in this district is associated with treated water and 10% is raw water. So that's the ratio we use for revenues. We're saying that 90% of the revenue should come from treated customer and 10% from raw. So there's a lot of information here, a lot of detail. Again, if you're interested, we can definitely talk more about that, but I don't know how, as you can see, I'm interested, but I don't know how much other people are. I might be the only one. So then we go into what does this mean to your current customers, your current base? And basically the bottom line is that we're saying that treated customers should pay slightly less than raw water customers. Slightly less, 0.5% less. And raw water should pay slightly more, 4.6%, based on the current revenues that they collect. And that's the proportionality, that's the logic, that's the rationality to make sure each customer class pays its fair share. So whenever I do one of these studies, it's always like this. It's a realignment. So you had a car, it's gone down that road, hit some bumps, hit the curb, you know, we try to be a good driver, but it happened. And now the car is misaligned. You need to cost of service, you realign it, and then you set it up, and you're good for another 5 years. And then in 5 years again, you're a little bit misaligned, and then you realign it again. So these are the factors we use. So we've talked about the revenues. We've talked about how we allocated costs between treated and raw water customers. And we use those two information together to develop the rates. Now, one thing I just want to make sure we all understand, our game plan is to have these rates implemented for January 2025, which means that you as a customer will see that on your bill in March of 2025. So your consumption that you use, how you use water from January, February, then will be reflected in that March bill. I just want to make sure we all understand that. So the challenge, and this is the big challenge in the room. I mean, there's the first challenge, making sure it's reliable and safe and we have this great service available. But the second challenge is, how do we have a rate structure that's defensible, meets Prop 218, while addressing the affordability concerns? And that's the challenge. That's the elephant in the room. And so I believe, given the constraints that I have, Prop 218 is a strong constraint. I believe we've tried our best to do that. So what we've done is we're still maintaining the uniform rate. That's what you have. So uniform is like gasoline, you just whatever you go to the gas station, how much you use, you pay. But we are recommending that currently, so there's different meter sizes. A meter size is basically about how much water you can instantaneously use in your house. The metaphor I like to use is internet speed. When you talk to your internet provider, they start talking about download speed and what you want, and you know, different packages out there. You can buy a high-end package so that everyone in the house can watch a movie at the same time, or you can just do a little bit less and pay less and have not everyone can watch a movie at the same time. You get to choose. So the same way, we have water usage and they all have different capacity. It's gallons per minute is the capacity unit that we use. Larger meters have more instantaneous capacity. Smaller meters have smaller instantaneous capacity. And what we're recommending is that the 5/8 and 3/4 inch meter, which are the smaller meters, should be paid at different rate than the 1 inch meter. Currently, the 5/8, 3/4, and 1 inch all pay the same rate. So we're saying that they should be bifurcated, separated out. And what that does is that the 5/8 and 3/4 will now pay less than the 1 inch. And I didn't ask them to play the drum, so I said that. So, and then we have, the treated supplemental charge right now is currently by account. Everyone pays that regardless of how large your meter is. We're saying that should be based on meter size, because that treatment plant really depends on how big your meter is. More bigger your meter is, more instantaneous water you use, more access you have to that system. So you should pay more. If you have a smaller meter, you have less instantaneous capacity, so you should pay less. So we're recommending that to be based on meter size. We're also talking about maintaining the low discount rate. Actually, we've been talking about actually increasing that discount rate. Currently it's $15 per billing period. What we're recommending is to increase it so it's 50% of the meter charge.
Currently, it's 25%.
25%. So we're recommending to, so again, that's that affordability concern. So that, and so if you're part of CARE program, you can do that. There's other people who can talk more about the logistics of how you do that program, but we definitely recommend individuals to look into that program. So based on that information, we've developed the rates. These rates have a 15% increase in revenue the first year, and then 10% increase in the following years. So these are the rates. So we went through a long journey here, or explaining how we got to these rates. One of the first things you'll notice is that the 5/8 and 3/4 inch meters, which is most customers, is different than the 1 inch. So one of the things that we're working on right now is making sure the meter size is on your bill, so you know what kind of meter you have, what size. But generally, the general rule of thumb is that if you have a house that has a fire sprinkler, you have a 1 inch meter. So those are all the newer houses. If you have an older house that doesn't have a fire sprinkler, I'm willing to put money on the table that you have a 5/8, 3/4.
5/8, 3/4.
Yeah, and you can also check, Adam, by,
I'll look at the face of the meter box and some
Digital?
on the back.
so if you know where your meter box is and your field of interest, you can open it up, look in there, and you can see the size. But most residential customers, I think 92%
92%.
have a 5/8, 3/4 inch meter. So only a very small percentage have that 1 inch, and it's the nice houses that have the fire sprinklers.
Is it built after like 2020 or 21?
Or remodel.
Or remodel, yeah, if you had a remodel, it automatically kicks in.
When the smart meters came in.
No, the smart meters have nothing to do with the meter size.
So we have the 5/8, 3/4 inch meter is smaller, and then if you see the meter sizes in the column 2025 FY, that's the fiscal year as we talked about. You see those meter sizes, the rates go up much more than the current. We also have the low income base charge, as I mentioned, that's 50% of the 5/8, 3/4 or the 1 inch meter. Again, we're expanding that policy given the challenges that we're facing. The next charge is the supplemental charge. As I mentioned, that is a charge currently $30 per billing period, regardless of meter size. We're saying that should be based on your meter size. So what that means is that actually the 5/8, 3/4, which is most of you, will see a reduction there. It goes from $30 to $23. We also have the usage rate that does go up over time, based on those percentages that I mentioned. And now one of the things that we want to make sure you understand is the combination of both of these. So on the water, there's really three parts of the bill. There's the meter base charge, there's the supplemental charge, and there's the consumption charge. If we combine the two fixed charges, I call them, the base and the supplemental together, then you can see that the 5/8, 3/4, which is currently $91.92, will go up to $95.96. So that's a $4 increase on the fixed charge in the first year. Now, it does go up each year, Now, one of the things that the board, and I know Nicholas is very strong about, is looking for grants and other sources of revenues. If those other sources of revenues come into play, then the district could potentially implement lower rates. So the challenge here with Prop 218, this is a process that we're going through. They hired me to do the study. There's time, energy that we're spending here. You're spending energy, board spending energy. There's a lot of work that's happening with this study. This is gonna be done for 5 years. But in the following years, you may receive more revenue from other sources. So the board could implement lower rates. And that's some of the benefits that we're looking at. But again, we're being sort of pessimistic because we can't guarantee that we're gonna get those revenues. On the grant side, Nicholas, you want to talk a little bit about?
Sure. There's a document that you can find, I don't know if anybody grabbed it, but it's kind of like this, got some colors on it. Since we've started here, I guess I started here in 2022. I started right after the mosquito fire. My first day at the office was the first day everybody got to go back home. We got about $500,000 in grants before that. Since I've been here, so it's almost 2 years. Next year, or next month will be 2 years. We pulled in about $2.86 million in grant money. We have $9 million that's right around the corner. We're just kind of waiting for some final paperwork, final signatures. We're waiting for some FEMA money. That's an amount of $3 million. So that's $12 million that we should have before the end of the calendar year. We also applied for a couple of state and federal appropriations. So the federal appropriation was accepted by the Senate and it's been moved over to the House at $7 million. And what we're trying to build with that is a hydro electric generator so that we can bring some more revenue in. So kind of doubly offsetting these rate increases. So any more revenue that we bring in is going to help reduce the amount of need for increased rates. And then the last one is we have been accepted by the House of Representatives for $20.5 million for WRDA, which is the Water Resource Development Act. And it is to study and build additional water supply here on the divide. So we can use that water supply to supply more water to homes, more raw water, lots of options. We were mandated a few years ago by LAFCO to look for redundant supplies, and this is one of the ways we're looking for redundant supplies.
So if we receive those revenues, then these rates that I'm showing and impact we could ease that off. But again, we can't count on that. If we just go back to the prior slide, I just want to just make sure one thing also is that I had the number of meters there. And you can see that most of the customers, 3,046 have a 5/8, 439 have a 3/4, and then you can see that 1 inch. So only 273 have the 1 inch. So you can see most of you have a 5/8 or 3/4. But again, you can look at the meter and we are going to make sure you have that information so you know what meter size you have.
And just to add, if for some reason you have a 1 inch because of some decision that was made previous and you are not mandated by the plumbing code, you can always reduce your meter size. There will be a charge for us to come out and reduce that meter size, but it's always an option. The only thing that would stop you is age of your home and your building permits that you originally granted. So as was stated, if you need to have those fire sprinklers, then you need to have that 1 inch meter.
So now let's talk about impacts. So there's a lot of information that we've provided. And bottom line is, what does this mean to me as a customer here? And so what we want to show you is two groups of customers. The first is the 5/8 inch meter, which is most of you. What we have is we have different usage levels. I have it also in percentiles and usage. And just to note, some of you may use water not that much in the winter and more in the summer. And some of you may be consistent with your water use throughout the year. It's common for people to go in and out of water use. In the summertime, people tend to use more, or you have people visiting you. So the usages are over here. We have the current bill, we have the proposed bill, we have the dollar difference and percent difference. As you recall, I'm trying to collect 15% more in revenue. If you notice, the difference is percentages, you don't see a 15% there. They're all below that. So this is that, remember I said I'm trying to achieve affordability for these customers. And there is a logic and rationality because you have smaller meters. Now, the 1 inch meter will see the more of the brunt of this increase, and larger meters will, because again, I'm trying to generate that 15% revenue, and you can see those percentage increases there. So we've talked about the treated. Now let's talk about raw water customers. So raw water customers, we're suggesting that we maintain the current methodology, the miners inches. There is a nuance though, that we realized as we went through the system, is that there's 8 customers that currently do not pay property tax to the district. They pay property tax, but they don't pay it to the district. And since they don't pay it to the district, we believe they shouldn't receive the property tax from other people. Now, the prior study failed to take that, I didn't do the prior study, the prior study failed to take that into account. And so it didn't acknowledge that, so we're gonna acknowledge that. So you do get quite a bit of property tax, which helps offset the rates. But those customers, those 8, shouldn't receive it, so you'll see a significant increase in those customers. And then we're, again, doing that 15%, 10% increase. So the next slide now shows us the rate schedule. It shows you the 1/2 inch and the 1 inch minor inch. That'll be most of you, again, that's the raw water, ditch water, irrigation customers. And then you see the outside district, where they go up substantially, because they don't get the property tax. So it's, it goes from $77 to $160 for a 1/2 inch. And then you see also, we want to make sure you understand the difference, and this is per month. The district bills bi-monthly, 2 times, and then 1 month. So there's 2.5 bills, you want to call it, or 3 bills. And then this is the charge you see associated with that and the increase. So I'm gonna stop here because I want to make sure we talk about water. I don't know if is there anyone here from ALT? Okay, so we'll talk about ALT in a second, but I want to talk about water first, and then we'll talk about ALT. So I'm gonna.
Yeah, we can absolutely take questions. So if you wanna, yeah. Barbara?
Barbara Laurie, can you explain to me further why raw water will be going up more than treated water? With more people paying for treated water and less people using raw water and using it for vegetables and livestock and things like that, why is that water going up? Cost of service should be a lot less,
So it's,
less maintenance.
it's proportionality. It's actually the amount of money that is being generated is far less than the treated water. There's a bigger pool of people to put the percentage on. And unfortunately, with the irrigation customers, there's a smaller pool. So when you put the same percentage on a smaller pool, it generates a larger dollar amount. Do we have anybody online?
I'm,
Oh, go ahead, please.
Where'd it go?
Who? He's right here. He's sitting down. You're plugging it into the shelf.
I can't even do it. On page 14. So when you get to your report, when you have a budget for all 5 years to show expenses and revenue.
Yeah, so all the charts, those graphs will be tables, and you'll see all the numbers associated with the budget and expenditures. What's called the pro forma. And that's what we will develop. So
You've seen the last one, it's like a budget.
yeah, that's what we're gonna do too.
So can you, when you do the personnel, they just clump everything in one line? Because that's 4 million out of a 6.2 million budget. That's this year's budget. So it's 2/3 of the budget. Can you put salaries, benefits, and then unpaid, PERS liability?
Yeah, I mean, we could,
Fade out a little bit
We can,
instead of just lumping it in.
yeah, I mean, that's up
get
to,
as granular as we think. we
yeah, I
can.
mean, it just
Well, and
depends.
then, and then you could have like, materials and supplies, group a whole bunch.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like the budget.
So remember, from our perspective, one of the things we want to do is, or the terminology we call functionalizations. In that we want to know how much of the cost, like the question about treated and raw water, we want to know how much of the cost. I understand you're more interested in labor and benefits.
Well, no, like the expenses and the revenues.
Yeah, but
Split out so you can actually see
what,
for 5 years.
yeah, what I'm more, if we go to slide 20. This is what I need to have in order to meet the legal requirements of Prop 218. which is these different components. So I need to be able to allocate this, and there's labor in here. So, but we can maybe do another,
Okay,
Table.
that's one of my other questions is, why are you only taking 5.3? These are what, O and M?
this is off, yes,
Okay, what about like, that's the whole thing, right?
no, so
This
go,
is just for water, doesn't include any of the zone charges or
Okay,
the
So
supplemental
the
charges.
budget is 6.2.
yeah, so
Because
this,
you need to look smaller because we're only talking about the water and the raw water,
Correct.
not the supplemental charge or the zone.
yeah, so we go to slide 18.
Okay, because the budget has 6.2 before you get to those.
Yeah, but hold on, so so that's these numbers.
So you're saying, okay, operating requirement,
Yeah, you're saying operating revenue,
even though the
capital.
budget is 6.2.
Wait, hold on. So the operating revenue plus capital plus the debt service, you add those all together, that might get your 6.2.
If you look at
So you're saying if I add, it'll make,
That's all the expenses.
what's operating revenue offset?
That's that miscellaneous, that's the interest income. And
Oh,
that,
this is revenue, okay,
yeah, so there's these are all the different components.
all right. Okay, I was looking at expenses. You don't have a thing with expenses?
Well, we net it all out. We net out we want to make sure we count the other sources of revenues that you receive, because
Correct.
for me, what's important is that $4 million.
Yeah.
Because that tells me how much I want to collect from rates in the first
Okay,
year,
that was in the first year,
without a rate increase. This is the cost of service analysis.
right?
So the cost of service analysis is I'm looking at I create a hypothetical rate, which is, now we're peeling back the onion a lot. And what we're looking at is a fiscal year 2024, that's my test year.
Correct.
I redo your rates and I create a hypothetical rate that collects 4.086 million. And then I do the 15% on top of that.
Okay, so that can be explained in your
Report. Yeah.
Okay,
I want to just be really clear. Our budget is not 6.2 million for water. It's 6.2 million for water. It includes the supplemental charge and it includes the zone charges. So that's what I want you to the number here, the 5.3, that is the water budget only. So we have to, they're two separate enterprise funds. We can't take any money from the water fund and do a project in ALT and vice versa. We can't take any money from ALT and do a project in the water fund. We have to keep those separated. That is an SEC violation if we do not, and the district would get sued greatly. So that's what, when we say what the budget is, the overall global budget of the district is 6.2 million. But that includes different enterprise funds, as we call them, that we have to keep separated.
okay, I'm not including those. Those are at the bottom. That's prior to that. And wastewater is above it, so I'm going all the way up to the middle of the budget, and it says 6.2. So anyway, all right. Then, can you explain the reliability factor, the X for the irrigation? I didn't understand that.
Yeah, so the treated customers receive water every month.
Right,
Raw water or ditch water receives it only 5 months out of the year.
okay.
They don't receive,
Well,
they don't receive it all year
Right.
round. They only receive it 5 months.
Right.
And in addition, raw water if something went wrong, we had to allocate water or restrict water use. We would restrict the water on the raw water customer. Because we always want to make sure we have water.
oh yeah, you're legally responsible.
Yeah, it's for indoor needs.
Right.
So there's a different reliability there. You see how that,
Okay, so you got 7 and 5 equals 12.
yeah,
But what I understand is they had in the old rate city, they had an asset allocation also. And what got flipped was supply and source of supply and raw water P and D got flipped from one was 21% and then they flipped it to 79. For the,
I don't know what the old study, I'm
did
not,
you even look at it?
no,
Is it
because,
just percent, it's a total opposite for the.
yeah, I don't think the district would want to waste time on me.
Well, yeah, but that's how they proportion
Yeah,
the
Yeah.
thing. And Oh, and then what's the rationale on the supplemental, why that was decided how to do that instead of just the flat 3016? Was that based on,
You're talking about by meter size?
no, the 3016 for the AOP supplemental charge?
Treatment.
Yeah, so because right now, what proposed is by meter size.
Okay, right, so what was the rationale? How did you figure out how to change? I mean,
If you're moving more water through your meter, we think you should pay more water because of that you're getting more water from the treatment
so
plant.
it's a percentage of the
Correct.
total that you somehow.
So we get the total debt service.
Right,
We look at, there's something called equivalent meters. And so that's the gallons per minute.
right,
And so each meter has a different equivalency factor.
okay,
So a 5 8 3/4 usually has 20. A 1 inch has 50, and then it goes up. So we take into account the gallons per minute. And that's the
okay, so
instantaneous,
it's the volume.
yeah, instantaneous volume. So we take that into account. So a larger meter should pay more than a smaller meter.
Can I just clarify what page you're looking at on the budget for your 6.2? Is it page 7?
What's the date on the bottom left? So with the back of the six, that's,
If it's page 7, that's our revenue.
yeah, it's right, yeah,
So that's not budget. That's what we're bringing in.
right,
But you said it's how much we have budgeted. So our budget is page 30. Or page, sorry,
which isn't in the,
it's in the budget.
I know,
Absolutely.
I have the budget here, but it's not in,
It is,
well, it's the paper that I had.
it's page 15, excuse me. And our budget for the water department is 5.7. That includes the supplemental portion. And then operating budget for ALT is 4.65.
Well, I grabbed the 6/6/24 budget that I had a copy of, and that's what I had.
It didn't sound like that.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't sound like
Yeah.
Pulled it off of our website. It's the one that was approved at the board meeting. Okay, was there any other questions about the water? Oh, one online.
I have one.
Oh, in the room first.
You mentioned something about the bi-monthly, billing. Why haven't you gone to a monthly billing?
It's a lot more labor intensive. Industry standard is bi-monthly billing. Is there anything else?
Just more postage?
Well, it would cost more. You have to mail them out.
Yeah, I know, but it'd be easier on all of us.
Well, you have to read them twice, go around reading the meters twice, then you gotta process the buildings twice.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's labor intensive. There's,
Okay.
you know, trucks and people and it is mail and there's lots of factors. We have to pay so we don't just, we generate the bills and then we have a company that mails them to you. So we have to pay that company more.
Okay.
Higher rates.
Yes.
He has a question.
Any more public questions?
There is one online. Do you want to take the online question real quick?
Mike and Vicky, we're ready for your question if you'd like to.
Hey, thank you for taking my question. It has to do with the raw water usage. And excuse me for not knowing, but I don't understand. Are we limited to a 5-month irrigation system? And why would we not consider adding another month? That seems like 20% of increased revenue would offset the increase rate hikes. And then also, are there options to reduce your meter size for the irrigated water? Thank you.
So a couple questions there. I'm gonna take the last one first. You absolutely can reduce the amount of irrigation you receive. You can go up or down any year you would like. The first part of your question is why can't we go to a 6-month window? It's really difficult to go to a 6-month window. We have explored opening up irrigation season. The big issue is it's good for some, it's not good for all. And it's very difficult to pick and choose on a system like that we have here. The system is 150 years old in certain places. And it's very difficult to turn that water on and off and keep a ditch full when not everyone is taking from that ditch. So getting a consistent water supply for that 6 month to 1 or 2 homes it's very, very, very expensive and it would not offset any of the costs.
Yes, but having that extra water late in the season is a valuable, valuable fire protection consideration for many of us. So thank you.
And that's absolutely something that can be brought to the board. We do a board meeting. The most important board meetings to discuss that are February, March, and April. We have a long discussion about water supply and irrigation season. And I would welcome you to come. The board can opt or vote to change the irrigation season and extend it. The downside to that is it would extend it for everyone. We could not, as I stated, do it piecemeal. It would have to go 100%.
Yeah, but if extending the season reduced the proposed rate increases, there may be more interest in that. So thank you. I'll come to the meeting.
Thank you.
What about maintenance on the ditch? Are we sometimes limited in amount of time?
Yeah, that was something about that.
Obviously, any less time we have, any more time we have more water flowing through, the less we would be able to do on the ditches. So that is definitely a fact. Yes,
How
ma'am.
long has it been since everyone has been surveyed who would participate in a longer season?
We have been working on this for the last year and a half or so.
And
I mean-
4.5 years ago, I know I haven't seen a question about it yet.
So we've posed the question in our irrigation committees and we've asked for public input. We've put out information. We can continue to ask that.
Haven't heard a thing, so I guess I'll keep looking and watching. Thank you.
Nick,
Yes.
and also if you would like to come to the irrigation committee on Tuesday,
I did, and I will
it
continue.
is second Tuesday,
Okay, thank you.
3:00 too.
I will be there, unless I'm picking up hay.
You can come with the hay.
I got something Wednesday.
Is there any more questions online? No more online. Did we have a question, I believe, from Director Stovall?
Yeah, on page 18 and 22, the concept of the revenue requirements are discussed. It says that in 2024, we generated about $4 million. If we look at 15% of that, it's about $600,000. And when I look at the revenue, it's like using a chicken analogy, those are all the eggs in the basket we're counting. It includes revenue from ratepayers, property tax, interest, SMUD, basically the fixed revenues we're looking at. And then you also mentioned basically the egg that hasn't hatched yet, and that's the grants. As looking at grants, for example, say we get a grant to line ditches, we have to use that money to line the ditches.
Correct.
But from a board perspective, if there's already a budget line item in the CIP to line the ditches, then that funds are available for what the board thinks is best and could possibly reduce the impact of the 15%.
Yeah, so on page 22, if you focus on the third line down, I guess it's the fourth line down, but it says capital requirement, that's $726,287. That is an estimation of the amount of extra projects that the district needs to do every year. And the grants, if we are able to pull those grants in, it would reduce the need to put that amount of money onto the rates. So if we got the $9 million and the $3 million, those are two major projects that we have within our capital improvement plan that we need to do it. Just so everybody's aware, those two projects, if you haven't heard, when the mosquito fire burned, it burned through the upper part of our district. So if everybody knows where Tunnel Hill is, everywhere above Tunnel Hill, I would say 75 to 80% of that burned. So there's no erosion control up there, and we're dealing with a lot of sedimentation and we're dealing with a lot of dirt movement. What we're trying to do is pipeline that area up there so that we can reduce the sedimentation and have reduced work coming down. It has a kind of a few different benefits: less evaporation, less infiltration, less sedimentation into our treatment plant. So where Walton Lake is, we would have less maintenance on Walton Lake moving forward. So that $13 million is going to more or less pipeline 5 of the 6 miles up there, or 4 of the 5 miles up there. Sorry, my math was off there. So it's going to almost pipeline the whole thing. And that was a key part of our capital improvement plan that would offset some of that $726,000.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think there was Director Saunders and Director Thornton.
So on page 18 with offsets, we can also relate to 22. I didn't see the SMUD offset.
So the SMUD is part of that 564,000. It's all lumped together. So that's penalties, fees, late fees, connection charges, SMUD, interest income. So that 564,000 is several line items of our budget that we put into one.
And then the other thing is, as you said, we say each time it's on there. One of the might say it is, we'd like to see the supplemental charge separate on the bill because there's an end date. And once it ends, that comes off, and it's blended in. We want to make sure that ends off the bill.
2039.
And then just a little bit to with Cherie that she brought up on. So we've done the things based on all of the things that we got from the feedback from the last study. So we've done the last rate study. So we did 4 studies in between and things that were taken into consideration, like there was a discussion on irrigation only used at 5 cent. That was captured in the last one. There were a lot of extra studies and stuff that we can also put online that have gone into this. So I'll ask Nick if we could have the updates from like the policies for cartography, which shows how we prioritize our CIP, the Castle study, point to the ALT study, and the salary survey study. So we've done a bunch of studies that I'm saying.
Yeah, and just to add or answer that or add to that, if you on the last page of your presentation, we haven't gotten there yet. There is a website. It's part of our website, but it's a special website that shows all of the documentation that were inputs into this rate study. So like was stated, the salary survey that we did a Castle study. The budget is on there. There's a lot of information. I apologize for not knowing it all off the top of my head. But if you go to that website, you can see all of the pieces to the puzzle. And that is where we got all the information. So we try to have really good inputs so that the output coming from the rate study was good.
Yeah. Well, I got a question on the rate increase as a whole. On page 7, it says that since 2019, inflation has increased by over 19%. So over that 5 years, it went up 19%. Then the next 5 years, we're going to be increasing rates 55%. Now, I got some theories on what's going on, but I'd like to hear it from you guys. If this doesn't make sense to me. Because there's inflation, the cost going up and all the things associated every year with costs go up. That basically inflation, the inflation rate, right?
Okay.
Okay, and so when you add it all up, the last 5 years, it came to 19%.
Okay.
But yet for the next 5 years, the increase to the existing is going to total 55% over the next 5 years. That seems excessive to me. And even if you take in the 15%, because I know that in the beginning, like in 2019, we were doing fine as far as financially, the district was doing fine. So we did put that 15% in there. So we actually ended up after the initial increase, there was scheduled 20% worth of increases, which we only did 5% of. So we didn't do 15%. So even if you take the fact that we didn't do that 15% and you have the 19%, that only comes to 34% the total for those 5 years. And yet we're raising the rates 55% for the next 5 years. So that's not jiving with me.
Yeah, so well, there's a couple of things we have to, one of the challenges that water and wastewater systems are facing is we call it the, I understand if you can, some people see it, is
I can see it better too.
it's called the era of replacement. And a lot of these water and wastewater systems throughout California and the United States were built And in most places, it was built in the seventies. Here, it was built much before that. And so we're dealing with, you have that inflationary increase that you just mentioned, but on top of that, you have an 80-year-old car. And that car needs to be replaced.
But that falls under the capital improvement, correct?
So
And that's why we're funding.
And we're putting in 700,000 on top,
We're putting
for
in,
$728,000 a year for the capital improvement.
in the study, in slide 10, we're gonna put $4 million over the next 5 years.
Okay, but that's included in this rate increase.
Yes.
Right.
We're gonna fund that.
So that's part of the percentages that you're referring to is also in adding the capital improvement money. So it's not just an inflationary percentage that we're chasing.
But we had, in the last 218, we had cover costs and put $1 million a year into the CIP.
Okay,
So the rates that were increased back then included $1 million a year
yes,
going into CIP. These rates are only including 700 and some, and they're higher.
That's the first year, and then each year after that, it goes up slightly. If you look again,
So is that right?
yeah, look at again, slide 10. You see in some years it's 800,000, some years 1 million.
it's an average.
It's an average, and that, but the.
Okay, that's average, okay, but it's the same thing. Yeah, if that's the average for 5 years, that's, yeah.
It goes, it's like
Understand that.
in 28, it's 1 million, in 27, it's 800,000.
Right.
Yeah.
It averages out to 728,000.
In the first year, it's 726. And then every year on that is it's factored into his calculation for the percentages.
Okay,
If you look at slide, you can look at the one down, slide 11.
Mhm.
It shows the gray bar on the top
Mhm.
is the funding for the CIP program.
Mhm.
And that is, see how it gets a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller?
Mhm.
So that's where you're having an increase in O&M expenses. That's the blue. So that's going up a little bit as well. Your debt service stays the same. So the debt service never goes up. But then the CIP kind of fluctuates during different years when we need to do different projects.
Okay,
So-
and we're also figuring that some of those projects are gonna be offset by grants.
And that's a very good possibility. However, we can't do.
I get that. You can't count on that. I understand that.
And I don't know if you remember, Director, and when I first came, I actually presented a slide, a scenario where we just only fund operating.
Mhm.
And then we funded capital. There was like 2 scenarios, like additive.
Mhm.
And my apologies, I don't remember the exact number, but I believe it was like around 7 or 8% was just needed just to fund operating costs
Okay, per year.
per year. So,
Okay.
so this addition that I'm asking for is to fund that capital. That's that aging infrastructure. That's the
Okay,
tire that's, it is bald, the brakes
So-
are soft,
so
the
you're saying,
engine needs to be replaced.
okay, so you're saying that 35% of that 55% is
Is
It's
inflation,
operating.
is that,
operating,
that's
okay.
that inflationary.
So then the rest of that is gonna be for CIP?
Yeah, that's to fix the roof.
Mhm.
There's something else also that you probably took into consideration but didn't mention, is that the numbers used in that 19% are government numbers that don't include the volatile energy
Yes.
and food. And so if you look at shadowed statistics, when it peaked out at 90 2 years ago, it was closer to 18, which included the volatile food and energy sector and commodities. And so we're not talking about food here, but we're talking about energy, and PG&E is going up 15 to 20% every year. And the commodities, what we actually use is what is factored into these numbers. So if you add that
Yes.
to these, everything you talked
Correct.
about, that's where you get closer to 55.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Director. Is that one of the things about inflationary numbers that we use is that basket of goods is not necessarily reflective of the basket of goods that is used to run a water system. The water system needs a lot of concrete and steel. And a lot of times that basket of goods that you're looking at have lower inflationary increase. So actually, the inflationary increase associated with water and wastewater is much more substantial than what the government uses.
And for instance, they took out coffee in November because it doubled in price, and they replaced it with tea so that they could justify lowering interest rates and keep a lower inflation number. So the metrics are different since 1980, so they've been manipulating the numbers.
That's why I've been reading tea now.
much of our costs everybody's feeling the inflation bubble, I'm sure. You don't want to see my PG&E bill, I can assure you of that. When we do all of our stuff, if you look at the best way to kind of see our inflationary numbers is if you look at the gas pump. When the prices of gas are going up, all of our materials are going up. Much of our stuff, more than 75% of our things are petroleum-based, plastics, paints, all the things that you need to do are all based on petroleum. And so when petroleum costs are very, very high, our material costs are very, very high. And so when you see gas prices coming down, that's when petroleum costs and our input costs are going to be coming down as well. So our inflation is tied very heavily to that petroleum market.
I understand all of it. Okay, but none of those things are going up this high of a percentage. That's my point is, this is just, 30, you're talking just in operations. Okay, our operations costs, you got in here, over the next 5 years are gonna go up 35% over what they are now. And over the last 5 years, everything only went up 19%. So this is what I'm having a hard time understanding.
Well, and so remember this goes out to 2029,
right? 5 years.
Yeah, and the number and the other numbers are just as of right now. So we don't know what the next 5 years. So you have to add the next 5 years.
That's what I'm saying. The last 5 years or 19, and the next 5 years, Adam, did you want to throw something in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit to the discussion, talking about CIP projects. So the last tank we lined was over off Reservoir Road about 3 years ago, about 3.5 years ago. Pretty close to you. And it was about $245,000. And as you know, we had in our CIP budget this year, we have another tank line we're projecting to do. And the preliminary estimate coming back from the engineer here $600,000. So in that case, I think piggyback on what Nick said, some of the material and specialized work that we do in this industry, I think we're seeing. I know you're saying your argument, inflationary number, but sometimes it's like you're 100% or 50% of cost 3 years ago.
Right.
So that is what.
Yeah, I know construction. I'm kind of caught up in that myself, and I know the materials and the construction materials and that sort of thing. Steel and aluminum, for example, went way up, it's coming down now, but yeah, no, I get that. I just it's just way out for me. I'm not understanding this, and so I'm hoping that when we get the final report, that maybe I'll have a better understanding of it. But just from doing the numbers that I'm seeing in here, I don't agree with it. I understand everything you're saying, and also I want to say something else. I told you this in private before. I want to tell you in public that I am very, very impressed with what you produced here. This compared to what we got last time, difference night and day. And so, and I appreciate all the work that you put into it. And the other thing I wanted to say to everybody else here is that one thing that is a whole lot better this time than last time is last time we were lied to. We were told staff was going to input into this, and this time staff did input into this. And so I'd like to also thank our staff, our awesome staff, and including it. And so
That was hard for him.
I want to hear you whine later. But anyway, no, what we're getting now is awesome. It is really awesome, because I was very involved in looking at the one last time, and so this is great.
And if I could just add, I want to piggyback on what you're saying. I don't want us to have to do 10% increases every year after the first year. I think that there's projects that I have that we're working on now that are going to be revenue generation projects. Mention the hydro. We're going to continue to chase the interest rates. We're going to continue to do everything in our power. There's an opportunity to potentially sell water. as if it's safe for the district. There's lots of options that we have that we can bring in revenues to offset some of these costs. So, next year, we may recommend to the board that we don't need to do the full 10%. Maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 3%, maybe it's 6%. I can't tell you. I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did, because I'd be a millionaire and I would not be here. I'd be on a desert island somewhere enjoying myself. But I foresee that we have some things that are coming down the pipeline that we will continue to look for to bring in additional revenues for this district. I have tried really, really hard in coming here to do that. That has been my goal since day one, and I've mentioned to all 5 of these that I'm going to continue to pursue every and all opportunities. And something else that I would like to offer that is we can do for this community and for this board is, in year 3, we can take a deeper look at this to make sure that we're on track. We can bring back Mr. Guar. We can say, hey, we want to make sure that your numbers are right. I'm going to tell you one thing about modeling. Water modeling, you're kind of shooting in the dark. You're throwing a dart at a dartboard that you can't even see. So they tend to be hard to do. They can be wrong. But we can go back and we can take a second look. So he can come back and say, hey, you're right on track. I recommend you keep going. Or, hey, you guys have brought in tons of revenue. I don't recommend you guys do another 10% because you don't want to hurt your constituency. So we do have lots of options, and the district is going to pursue all of those options. You have my word.
And I think that as a board, we've been doing that every year. We look at the audit and we look at, and that's why all the scheduled rate increases weren't implemented, because we were already meeting the goals, and we're only allowed to charge our customers what our actual costs are. And so when we got bringing in more revenue than we say we needed to do that, then that's why there was the rate increases that were scheduled, was 5% ones is why. And I plan on continuing to do that every year, look at the audit, see where we're at, and maybe consult with Sanjay and see what he thinks and that sort of thing. But I'm planning on looking at it every year. See how we're doing, just like we have the last years.
Yeah. Question. To piggyback on what Director Pomero said, what Sanjay said, I know in reviewing the cost of service survey that you did for Placer County Water District, there was a page which talked about inflation of building materials, and I don't remember all of them that were on there. You mentioned aluminum and iron. I remember cement costs, I think, went up 60%. And so when we look at a district, we're not a consumer price index. We're building material index for the most part. So I assume that same concept is going to be in our detail rate study, which will show, far beyond what the consumer price index is, building materials, things that are relevant to our district.
This part of the business cycle, this stage, this is where the commodity price super cycle begins. This is where it really begins, not where it's been, which has been high. This is where it starts taking off at this time, typically in this super cycle.
We do have I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can I just ask a quick question? I know you said you're gonna keep on top of it. You mentioned earlier, there's a certain month that is addressed for water for the irrigation the following year. Is there a certain month that this all would be coming up again?
Yeah, it'll be coming up during the budgeting process. And so we start budgeting around January. We do a 6-month budget review to see where we are in the budgeting process, to see how much we've spent, if we're on track. And then generally March, April, and May is when we work with both the finance committee and the board of directors to develop the budget for the next year. At that time is when we look at what we've done for the previous year, and then anything we anticipate coming for the next fiscal year. And so, yeah, we would welcome all of you to come to our board meetings when we're doing budgeting. It's very boring, but you get to see lots of cool, pretty numbers. But we always put that out to the public, and it's always available. And we always have either in May or June is when we approve the budget for the year.
Thank you.
Christina?
And I think part of what you were going to is when we do our water reliability for the year. And we start looking at that in February, March, and then make the roughly final determination at the April meetings, we have to make the decision where we're gonna hit it, May 1st, May 15th, wherever. So definitely keep on track, and come to the meeting. The irrigation committee is running, usually we were gonna take time off last year and we didn't. But usually the February, March is when we're really looking at numbers, and that's when we're gonna be getting numbers from Adam of what our projections for electric, for our projections for the year for water.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, we're gonna talk about ALT and zone. Page.
Yeah, 33, thank you. So now we're talking about zone wastewater or ALT. So similar structure as the prior presentation. We want to first talk about like the big picture, what we're facing here. So the first thing is that the last rate increase occurred in 2018. Since 2018, we've had 21% of over 21% of inflation. But the real challenge here is that there was a credit provided. It was provided to all the different types of customers, and that has been overextended. That credit should have been stopped, a couple of years ago, but it didn't occur. And because of that, well, we're at this critical junction where expenses are 3 times higher than revenues. Revenues are roughly $200,000. Expenses are $600,000. So you can quickly see that what needs to happen. And because of that, the wastewater fund will run out of money by 2026. So the question is how much revenue does the district need to deal with this wastewater system, disposal of it? And so the first thing we do is we ask ourselves the reserves and what kind of reserve level we want. One of the things that we've looked at this many times internally, trying to figure out what's the lowest way we can increase these rates, because it's significant. So one of the things we've done is lower the reserve levels to a level that we think is acceptable, but they are low. So first, we still have the 33% of operating budget, which is industry standard, but the capital replacement is only $13,000. And then we only have $50,000 for emergency. So really what we want in this reserve, the goal is to have 235,000. We do have that money right now, but the challenge is that the current rate only pays for like 1/3 of the total expenditure. And so we have some capital projects in the first few years that we're dealing with, but after that, it's really just an operating cost business. That's what's shown over here. The next slide shows, one more slide. Thank you, Liz. It shows the status quo of the financial plan. That line is the revenue. And as I said, that's around 200,000, a little bit more. Total expense is around 600,000. And so as you can see, this is a dire situation. And because it's so dire, we go to the next slide. We see the ending balance where we're good the first year, but in all the out years, we're bleeding and we're eating into reserves. And because of that, that means that the water fund would have to be a bank. And this fund would have to borrow money from the bank. You can't have water pay for wastewater, so it would be a loan. That is one potential option there. But then that would have more cost bearing on the water fund because you already saw those increases already. So we're just adding more to the water fund. The water fund isn't flush with money. So we have 2 challenges here, but this one is more significant. So in order to solve this problem or this challenge, what we're recommending is 155% increase. That is substantial. And then after that, we get to a steady state where it's 5% each year. And by doing that, we meet all our expenses each year. The next slide basically shows the ending balance. We're meeting our reserve targets and we're actually slightly eating into reserves in each year projection. So once we've done that, then the next question we want to ask is, well, how do we allocate that cost? There's different types of customers, actually 4 different customer types. We want to make sure each customer class pays its fair share. So in order to do that, we look at the number of customers. So there's CDS customers, there's developed lot, undeveloped lot. There's non-CDS customers, there's developed lot, undeveloped lot. So we know the number of that, it's there. The next thing we do is we look at the operating budget. Next slide, please. And we ask ourselves, well, how much does it cost to do CDS O&M? So we work with staff to figure that out. We ask ourselves, what is the cost with non-CDS O&M? We ask ourselves, what's the cost of permitting that everyone pays? And then what's the CIP cost, which only CDS customers pay? So X's are the associated costs that each customer pays. So developed lots that are CDS only pays the CDS O&M, permit, CIP. If you're an undeveloped lot, you just pay the permit and CIP. If you're a non-CDS, you pay just non-CDS permit, and your undeveloped lot, you just pay the permit. And the permit fee is the same. And the next slide is just the numbers. You know, we did the math, divide things, and these are the unit, we call them unit rates in our jargon terminology. And we add them up and we get this. Now, these rates are without that revenue adjustment. This is that hypothetical cost of service rates where I just realign the car and we get these rates. And now the question is, well, what is it with the proposed increase? And that's where, you know, you see the increases. These are dramatic, where the developed lots go up, currently $99.77 to $186. Undeveloped lots, 35, stays roughly the same, 35.81 first year. Developed lot CDS customers is 22.19. Most of the credit, from my understanding, it has been given to the non-CDS developed lots. The credit's been given to everyone, but most of it proportionally has been given to those individuals. So they do see a more of an increase from $22 to $68. And then undeveloped lots, $19 to $22.70. And the next slide has two components to it. The first component is just the wastewater bill change. So we have the current proposed dollar and percent. So you can see that, and you can see the increases there. And then you're also a water customer. So what we've done is we've said, well, if you're a typical water customer, that's a 5/8, 3/4 inch meter. You use the average water use, which is around 13. Then we have those two together and we add them and we can see what the total bill is for the different customers bi-monthly. So that's this section. This is the, you know, we're definitely interested in hearing your comments on this. So I'm going to stop and we can talk about this next.
Say, go one more slide.
And the next slide actually shows.
I should show the website.
It shows the link in the website.
So if you see on the top there, I just wanted to make sure that everybody saw where to find that website. So if you really want to go and look at any of the documentation that went into this, and that will be referenced in the study, it'll all be there for your, you can download it, you can print it. If you want us to print it, you can call us and we can get it to you.
I wanted to say that we went through that section pretty quick. I'm reading the pulse of the audience. Michelle, did you understand?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we got an overextension of the.
I'm not.
Yeah.
No, I know. Yeah, I see what's going on.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
I was watching.
Go ahead.
Sure, Sanjay.
Yes.
What was wrong with the previous rate study? Because the credit was supposed to go through 2023, 24. And it was all mapped out, a certain amount. You're saying that it's over,
It was overextended.
Okay.
meaning it went past 23, 24?
It was just,
I thought
Calculated.
it was.
Yeah.
2021.
In our estimation, the old rate study was miscalculated.
Oh.
So if staff wants to pay me to review the old study, I could do that. I would say that's a waste of your money. So I wouldn't recommend.
We're already in the hole. Why would we
Yeah.
go in further?
Well, it has to be done
That's why I
twice.
wouldn't recommend doing it.
Michelle, I did some quick math on that. The 22 we've been paying recently with the credit of about $30 shouldn't have gone 5 years. It should have probably gone around 3.
Yes.
And so that extra $450 or so we haven't paid that we should have in the last 2 years is the reason why this 68 isn't more like 58 now. It would have gone up a lot or some, but we're planning to play catch up for the $450 extra we should have paid by the overextension of the credit for 2 years.
Got it.
And this is something else we're gonna pay really close attention to once this goes into effect. If we don't need the 5%, or if it looks like we have enough reserves, we're not gonna just continue with this without having a second look.
Okay.
And I have here a brief overview of a breakdown of impact. I got it greatest to lowest proportional impacted rates to the customers affected by the rate structure. Probably the most impact either by percentage or dollar amounts, roughly, not necessarily dollar amount or percentage, but a mixture of both, is the 8 irrigation properties outside the property tax jurisdiction, outside the district, but inside the sphere of influence, where property taxes don't contribute towards our water district revenue. So it's those 8. Okay. Secondly, those 299 customers representing 7.9% of the 3,784 treated water customers that have meter sizes of 1 inch or greater. That who might be the next most likely or highly impacted. Followed by irrigation water users, followed by the ALT CDS, basically the golf course community wastewater disposal system customers, representing 13% or 138 lots of the 1,085 within the gated enclave. And then followed by the ALT wastewater non-CDS golf course customers, which would be you and me. And then followed by the 5/8 and 3/4 inch meters. And then lastly, I could see if Nicholas could check me on it, the lower income water users, because of a 50% reduction in the credit or the whatever you term, they possibly could see a little bit of a decrease the first year or two.
There is a, if you are a low income user, you will see a slight decrease in your water bill if you're applied for the LEAR.
Unless you got a 1 inch meter or something like that.
Okay.
But I just wanted to summarize that for you.
For wastewater?
No, for treated water.
Treated water.
I think there's a question.
No, go ahead, Bob.
Nick, are there any grants on the horizon specifically to address wastewater systems?
So much of the CIP that we're looking at using in the zone area is small equipment, small protection for that equipment. Very little CIP. There are 2 larger projects that we have on the horizon, and we will not consider those larger projects unless we receive some sort of grant funding. We do have an upgrade pending for the pump station that moves the water to the leach field, to the CDS field. And then we also have the potential in the future of building a packaged treatment plant, which could offset some of the water use at the golf course, which would take that affluent water at the CDS field, treat it, send it to the golf course. They could water the golf course. So that would help offset some of their funding and costs. Those are both projects that we would consider only if we could find outside funding to do those. Those are anywhere between 850,000 for the pump station, and the treatment plant could go anywhere between 750 and $1.5 million, depending on certain engineering factors.
Thank you.
And approval by the state.
Oh, well, that'd be part of it.
Any more questions about the last segment, ALT?
Don't even talk to me about the golf course.
At this time, I'd like to say that for you folks here, we really enjoyed and appreciate if you would partner with us to be the voice of the informed. That if you hear social media, you know what I mean, Michelle. If you could direct them to the staff or the board, they'll be happy to address these issues, have them call the office and not play armchair quarterback with speculation or projection.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if you could be
Proactive.
yeah, just be, help just for them to get the accurate information. We thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm not on the ALT chat page, because I got kicked off. So, yeah, if I do hear any scuttlebutt, I will have them go to Nick or you.
Or any of the board members.
Or Yeah.
I have some cards here if anybody wants some cards too.
Director Thornburg, go ahead.
Yeah, and also another thing that we need to get out there is the fact that now the district has a YouTube channel. And all these meetings and everything, you're all on YouTube, right? So you want to wave or anything like that.
Okay.
And
So
all,
that way you can direct people to it, you know, and you go to the YouTube channels, GDPUD. And it shows you all the board meetings and real easy to access and all that sort of thing.
and any of the meetings that pertain to the rate study will be linked on that website that is linked on your paper right there. So you won't even have to go to YouTube. You can just go to our site. It'll take you to the YouTube, but it will also take you specifically to these town hall meetings and any other meetings where we discussed it.
Thank you. At this time, we need to get consensus of the board for direction for Sanjay to move forward writing the report.
I'm for it. Same.
Any more director?
So you're making a motion or?
It's not a motion. We're looking for consensus.
Some of the things I'd like to see is, this is a Prop 218, and if we give a clear on number 4, CIP, and just move before we don't have that, so that's a line budget offset. So it doesn't start creeping into something else when we think it's extra revenue, because that happens a lot where this is supposed to go to CIP, so I'd like to make sure that once that's in the report, this is a line item Prop 218 that it has to be going to CIP. Also, the interest charges, so I know it's currently going everywhere where it is, and I believe the board gave the direction of where we want that to go, so we gotta make sure that that's reflected also. Other than that, everything looks good moving forward, and we'll just keep working with the numbers.
Director Thornburg, very good. Consensus, yes.
Why don't you just say, everybody raise their hand who wants it.
Everybody raise your hand who wants it. Done. Okay, with that, I would like to seek a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded by Director Stovall. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Meeting to adjourn.